"Mr. Kent, the divorce papers are ready. Should I send them over now?" The study was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After a long moment, Jason Kent replied, "Just hold on to them for now." Hanging up, he left the study. Outside, Tina was playing on her phone. Tina. Even though they were getting a divorce, Jason wanted to have one last real conversation with her, to make one final effort for his marriage. After all, he had been deeply in love with Tina for nearly half his life. But Tina just looked up and said, "Jason, why aren't you making dinner yet?" Jason could only turn and head to the kitchen. Distracted, he was scalded by hot oil. As he flinched back, he knocked over a bowl on the counter. Crash! The sharp sound of shattering ceramic echoed through the apartment. Jason's heart clenched. Sure enough, the next second, Tina rushed in. When she saw the pattern on the porcelain shards littering the floor, her eyes widened and she screamed, "Who told you to use that bowl? What is wrong with you?" After shouting, Tina's beautiful eyes reddened, giving Jason the eerie feeling that he had just shattered someone's life. Watching her, Jason felt a complex mix of emotions. He knew it wasn't about how expensive the bowl was, it was because Ethan Carter had bought it. "I'm sorry." Jason pressed his lips together and bent down to pick up the pieces, but Tina pushed him away. "Get out. I don't want to see you right now." She pointed to the door, completely oblivious to the burn on his hand. The disappointment he'd been suppressing finally overflowed. Before leaving, Jason paused at the door and said softly, "Tina, it was just a bowl." So many things in the kitchen were tied to Ethan. This bowl was hardly the only one. But Tina couldn't accept that, nor could she believe Jason would say such a thing. "What do you mean, just a bowl?" She was shocked and furious. "Do you have any idea that Ethan and I picked this out on August 23rd, 2015, when we took a trip to a pottery festival upstate? Jason, did you do this on purpose?" Jason closed his eyes, overcome by a profound sense of exhaustion. Whenever anything involved Ethan, Tina would lose control, becoming hysterical, like a madwoman. Tina and Ethan had been childhood sweethearts, inseparable since they were kids. They were even promised to each other. If everything had gone according to plan, they would have married. Jason Kent would have been nothing more than the guy who loved her from afar, destined to never have his feelings returned. But fate was cruel. 3 days before their wedding, Ethan died in a car crash. Tina was devastated. If her parents hadn't knelt on the floor, begging their only daughter to find the will to live, she would have taken her own life to follow him. Later, Tina had come to Jason, begging him to pull her out of her despair. Even after all this time, Jason could still remember the desperate, tormented look in her eyes. "Help me forget him," she had pleaded. "Please?" It was as if he'd won the lottery. While Jason mourned Ethan's tragic death, he couldn't help but feel a surge of joy at finally having a chance to win Tina's heart. He and Tina married quickly. After the wedding, Jason tried everything to make Tina fall in love with him. But it had been 8 years, and nothing he did could carve even the smallest crack in her heart. Jason gave a self-mocking smile and didn't bother explaining further. Tina could recall the exact date Ethan had bought a random bowl, but she had forgotten that today was his birthday. The burn on his hand seemed to sting all the way to his heart. Then it went numb. Jason turned to look at Tina, his expression calmer than she had ever seen it. "We've been married for 8 years. Let's give our marriage 8 more chances," he said. If Tina could put him before Ethan just once, he could keep going. Tina frowned, not understanding what he meant. Just as she was about to ask, the doorbell rang. It was the engineer who specialized in porcelain repair. She instantly lost interest in questioning him and rushed to open the door. Jason stood frozen, watching her back. That was the first time. "Tina," he said silently, "don't you know I'm about to give up on you?" Ever since the idea of divorce had taken root, Jason had liquidated his assets and drafted a preliminary divorce agreement. Next, he started sorting out the business ties between their two families. Jason was the CEO of Kent Enterprises, and Tina was the daughter of the Smith family. After 8 years of marriage, the two companies were tightly intertwined. A divorce would inevitably impact both their stock prices and partnerships. He needed to prepare in advance to mitigate the potential risks. He also needed to inform Tina's parents of his intentions so that neither family would be caught off guard. After their fight that day, Tina had taken the repaired bowl and gone to a friend's house. It wasn't until Jason showed up that Mr. and Mrs. Smith learned their daughter and son-in-law had argued again. When they heard Jason was considering a divorce, Mrs. Smith was a bit surprised. "Jason, are you really sure about this? I want to give it one last try. If Tina and I still can't make it work," Jason said with a small smile, "then maybe it just wasn't meant to be." Mrs. Smith knew about her daughter's unresolved grief. Hearing his words, her face filled with guilt. She wanted to say something to persuade him but found she had no words and could only sigh deeply. "Oh, Tina," she. After Jason left, Mr. and Mrs. Smith called Tina home. Only then did she learn what Jason had meant by 8 chances. But she was dismissive, even finding it a little amusing. "He said he wants a divorce?" she asked back. "No way," Tina said, unconvinced. "He loves me too much." Jason loved her the way she loved Ethan. He would give his life for her. How could Jason ever bear to give her up? Still, she admitted she had gone too far last time. It was only later that Tina remembered that day had been Jason's birthday. Feeling a pang of guilt, Tina thought for a moment, then ordered a small cake online. She went into the kitchen and made him a bento box, then picked out a pair of cufflinks at a department store before heading to the Kent Enterprises office tower with her hands full. When Jason returned to his office after a meeting, he found his wife, who had stormed out of their home in a huff, dozing off at his desk. Hearing him, Tina lifted her head, her eyes brightening. "Honey, you're back." She ran over, took his hand, and began to apologize profusely. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I was too harsh the other day. You know how I get when it comes to anything about Ethan. I just lose all reason." She tugged on his sleeve, looking pitiful. "I was wrong. Please forgive me." When she pleaded like this, Tina was like a child who'd made a mistake. Head tilted up, her pretty face flushed, making it impossible to stay mad at her. And it was true. As long as Ethan wasn't involved, Tina was a decent wife. She would cook for Jason, buy him gifts, accompany him on business trips, and even plan small, romantic surprises from time to time. What comforted Jason the most was that Tina never hid their marriage or pushed him away because of Ethan. This was why Jason had held on for 8 years and why he couldn't easily let go now, why he was trying to give it one last push. Sighing, Jason put his arm around her. "There's a charity gala next week. I need a +1. Will you come with me?" Wanting to appease him, Tina immediately agreed to whatever he said. Of course. The charity gala soon arrived. That day, Tina waited at home for the driver, dressed in a luxurious designer gown. Jason was still at work and would meet her at the hotel entrance later. But at 5 p.m., Tina received a call from an unknown number. "Tina, it's Shawn. I'm in NYC, just landed at JFK. Can you come pick me up?" Hearing the name, Tina was first surprised, then excited. "Shawn, it's you. Wait right there, I'll be there soon." She ran out happily, completely forgetting her promise to Jason. "Sir, Miss Smith just picked someone up from the airport. Now she's with him at his hotel." At the gala, Jason stood alone, away from the crowd, looking down at the photos his driver had sent, his face expressionless. In the pictures, his wife, the one who had promised to be here, was joyfully embracing another man in the middle of the airport crowd. Jason recognized the man as Ethan's younger brother, Shawn Carter. Ethan again. He could never win against a dead man. And he could never win against anything or anyone connected to Ethan. A bitter taste spread from the back of his tongue. Jason suddenly realized that holding on to any hope or expectation for Tina made him look like a fool. After 8 years of failing to move her heart, could he really expect her to suddenly fall in love with him? But since he had promised 8 chances, he wouldn't go back on his word. Jason expressionlessly sent Tina a text message. Second time. It wasn't until midnight that Tina returned home. The lights were on, but Jason was nowhere to be seen. Remembering the text she'd received, she muttered, "Is he mad?" In the past, no matter how late she came home, Jason would always wait up for her. Tina kicked off her shoes and gently pushed open the bedroom door. When she saw Jason sitting up in bed reading, she breathed a sigh of relief. She ran over, wrapped her arms around his waist, and began her well-practiced apology. "I'm sorry, honey. Shawn came back to the country today and asked me to pick him up. Then everyone got together for a welcome dinner for him, and time just got away from me. I missed the gala with you." Tina nuzzled against his chest. "I didn't cause you too much trouble, did I?" Jason smelled the alcohol on her breath. He subtly pushed her away and said, "No. It was just that the opening dance, which was supposed to be for him and Tina, had to be given to another couple since he was missing his partner. He just had to endure people pointing and whispering behind his back. No trouble at all, really. So that text you sent," Tina began, but her phone suddenly rang. Seeing the caller ID, she forgot her question and quickly answered, "Hello, Shawn?" Hearing what was said on the other end, Tina's expression changed. "Wait there. I'm on my way." She was about to rush out the door. Jason frowned and grabbed her wrist. "Where are you going?" Tina was anxious. "Shawn's hotel room has a hidden camera. I'm gonna check it out." As disappointed as Jason was, he couldn't let his wife run off alone to deal with something so dangerous. His voice turned cold. "Something like that is a job for the police, not you. But Shawn is Ethan's brother. You've met him before. How can I not help?" Tina shot back. Her words were so matter-of-fact that they made Jason seem like the one being unreasonable. Jason's lips moved, but the man who could close multi-million-dollar deals at the negotiating table was speechless. In the end, for Tina's safety, he had to call his security and go with her. In the car, Jason said, "Tina, this is the third time." But Tina, in the passenger seat, was frantic and couldn't hear a word he was saying, just urging him on. "Jason, can you drive faster?" She was openly worrying about another man right in front of her husband. Jason had already accepted that he would always come second to anything related to Ethan. He said nothing more and focused on driving. When they arrived at the hotel, Jason saw Shawn, who looked about 70% like his brother. The young man's handsome face was dark as he spoke in a low voice with the police. Seeing them, Shawn came over and said, "Tina." Then his gaze fell on Jason. "And this is? He's my husband," Tina explained casually, then gestured with her chin toward the group of people crowded around the hotel room door. "What's going on?" Shawn gave a bitter smile. "I've already called the police, but the hotel is denying everything. They're saying I brought the camera myself to frame and extort them." Tina's expression hardened. She walked over and began arguing with them. Jason stood on the edge of the crowd, watching coldly as she made calls to hire the powerful law firm Rhodes Associates and argued fiercely on another man's behalf. He let out a silent, pent-up breath. "I hear my brother was the one you never forgot." Shawn, standing beside him, suddenly spoke in a low voice. "I look a lot like him. If I tried to steal you from your husband, what do you think my chances are?" Shawn's bright eyes were full of confidence. Jason might have been provoked in the past, but not anymore. What can be stolen was never really yours to begin with. His expression remained indifferent. He didn't even grant the challenge a glance. Shawn felt like he'd punched a pillow. Annoyed, he sneered, "Don't come crying to me when I take her from you." "I wish you luck," Jason said calmly. Tina couldn't love him, and she wouldn't love an impulsive kid like this either. Her heart belonged only to Ethan. But precisely because Shawn was Ethan's brother, he commanded Tina's full attention. Jason stayed until Tina had dealt with the hidden camera incident and found Shawn a new place to stay. Only after everything was settled did they head home. "Honey," Tina said in the car, remembering something. She turned to Jason. "Shawn is having an art exhibition in a couple of days. Could you help him out and make an appearance?" Jason almost laughed out of sheer anger. He couldn't understand how Tina had the nerve to ask. Not only was she running around for another man, but she also wanted to drag her husband into it. Jason did laugh, but his chest felt tight. "Tina, I'm not that generous." Tina blinked, confused. "But Shawn is Ethan's brother." "Precisely because he's Ethan's brother." Jason slammed on the brakes, pulling the car over. He turned to face Tina, his eyes red in the dim light. He had never understood how Tina could so brazenly expect him to watch her love another man. Seeing his anger, Tina opened her mouth but said nothing. A suffocating silence filled the car. Jason had always wanted to have an open, honest talk with Tina, but now he realized it was pointless. He started the car again, his soul filled with utter disappointment as he drove back the way they came. For the next few days, they were locked in a cold war. Jason knew Tina was angry, but he felt wronged, too. Didn't she know how much he couldn't let go of Ethan? Why did she have to keep fighting with him over a dead man? She was usually so good to him otherwise. Tina felt hurt and angry. She didn't want to talk to Jason, who would come home, say nothing, and disappear into his study. So she threw all her energy into Shawn's art exhibition. "Tina, if you help me this much, won't Jason get upset?" Shawn asked with some concern at the gallery. Tina pouted. "He won't. In a few days, Jason's anger would cool down, and everything would be fine. Whenever they fought before, Jason would always be the first to talk to her within 3 days. But she didn't realize that this was already the 5th day of their Cold War. "Sir, here are a few PR strategies we've prepared for your potential divorce. Please take a look." In his office, Jason opened the file. Before he could even read it, his assistant rushed in. "Mr. Kent, the building where your wife is attending an art exhibition today is on fire." Jason's face changed instantly. "What did you say?" When he arrived at the scene, thick smoke was billowing from the building. The entire left side was engulfed in flames, and chaos reigned. Jason frantically searched for Tina among the fleeing crowd but couldn't find her. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto a figure. He grabbed the soot-covered Shawn, who was being carried along by the crowd, and demanded, "Where's Tina?" Shawn's eyes darted away. She's still on the 4th floor." Jason's heart sank. Without a second thought, he charged into the building. Pushing against the tide of people, he raced up to the 4th floor and finally found Tina, stumbling as she tried to retrieve a painting. Seeing him, she was surprised. "Jason, what are you doing here?" "Let's go," Jason said, grabbing her arm. "The fire is about to spread here. We have to leave now." But Tina shook him off and ran deeper into the gallery. "No, Ethan's last painting is in there. If it's destroyed, it's gone forever." As he watched his wife recklessly charge into the thick smoke, Jason closed his eyes. He went to stop Tina, who had mild asthma. "I'll go." As he passed her, he threw out the words, "Tina, this is the 4th time." But the roar of the crowd drowned out his whisper, and no one heard. Ethan's painting was in the center of the exhibition, which was already on fire. Jason soaked his clothes with water and rushed in to grab it. But as he was leaving, a massive glass display case collapsed, crashing down on him. The intense pain made him drop the painting. Jason grunted and fell to his knees. The next moment, a figure darted past him and quickly picked up the canvas. Once she confirmed the painting was undamaged, Tina let out a sigh of relief. Only then did she turn to check on her husband. "Jason, are you okay?" Jason didn't speak. He wasn't sure if it was the smoke or the pain, but his eyes stung terribly. He dodged Tina's touch and struggled to his feet. "I'm fine. Just hold on to your painting." Tina did as he said, carefully protecting the canvas in her arms. A flicker of cold mockery passed through Jason's eyes. He grabbed the coughing Tina and pulled her out of the fire, blood dripping from his arm, leaving a startling trail behind them. Jason didn't know when he passed out. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed, with a red-eyed Tina sitting by his side. Seeing him open his eyes, Tina lunged forward. "Honey, how do you feel? You lost so much blood. I thought you were going to die." Her eyes were already welling up again. "I'm so sorry. It's all my fault." At this point, Jason didn't know what to say. He just felt so tired. Tina was genuinely concerned about him, and she was genuinely guilty. She also genuinely never chose him over Ethan. Her love for Ethan was like molten lava, fierce and scorching, and it had left him covered in burns. If he could go back in time, he would never have married her. Jason remained silent. Tina, thinking he was too weak to speak, carefully tucked him in. "Honey, you rest. I'm gonna check on Shawn. He was injured, too." 5th time, Jason said, opening his eyes. Tina paused, meeting Jason's calm gaze. After a moment, she took a step back. Okay, I won't go. I'll stay with you. Once she was sure Jason was asleep, she quietly got up and left the room. And in the room, the man who was supposed to be asleep slowly opened his eyes. Jason's injuries were serious. His shoulder blade was fractured, requiring surgery and at least a month in the hospital. Tina shuttled between home and the hospital, but she spent most of her time in Shawn's room, reasoning that he was all alone with no one to care for him. Hurt beyond feeling, Jason just grew numb. He said nothing and quietly recovered on his own. About 20 days later, his assistant pushed him in a wheelchair to the cemetery. Today was the anniversary of his parents' death. In previous years, Tina would always accompany him to pay respects. But today, from sunrise to sunset, Jason waited in vain. Mom, Dad, it looks like I might be alone again. Jason wiped the dust from the black and white photos with a soft cloth and smiled. But being alone is probably for the best. At least it wouldn't be so suffocating and painful. As he was leaving, Tina finally arrived, holding a bouquet of fresh lilies. Sorry, Jason. Shawn suddenly came down with a high fever, and I was in a total panic. I just remembered it was the anniversary of your parents' death. Why didn't you say anything? Are you a doctor? Jason interrupted calmly. Are you related to him? Who are you to him? Tina's lips parted. But Jason cut her off again. Are you going to say he's Ethan's brother? Tina hesitated for a moment, then nodded. But I don't like Ethan, Jason said, looking straight at her. I don't like him, and I don't like anything or anyone related to him. So why do you think I should understand you just because it's Ethan? Tina, this is the 6th time. The 6th time since he'd decided on divorce that Tina had neglected him for Ethan. Only 2 chances left. At this rate, Jason thought with a wry twist of his lips, that day would come very soon. Tina was stunned. She stared at Jason's grim face, her eyes wide as if she were seeing her husband for the first time. Slowly, her beautiful eyes filled with disappointment. Jason, you've gone too far. Jason said nothing. After speaking his mind, he silently lowered his gaze. He had held those words in for so long. Now that they were finally out, he felt a strange sense of relief. Jason even managed a small, bitter smile. Tina turned and left with a cold expression. When she got back to her parents' house, she was furious. So I forgot the anniversary of my in-law's death. But I rushed over as soon as I remembered. I was wrong, but isn't he wrong too? He's the one who didn't remind me or wait for me. Tina couldn't believe Jason would confront her like that at the cemetery, embarrassing her in public. He was never like this before. Of course she knew Jason didn't like Ethan, but her husband had never held it against her. He would never get angry at her over it. But recently, Jason was like a different person, constantly clashing with her over anything related to Ethan. This was the 2nd time Jason had yelled at her. It's not like there's anything going on between Shawn and me. Why is he always trying to compete with a dead person? Am I not good to him otherwise? Tina's face was dark enough to drip ink. Her parents, who had heard the whole story, hesitated, wanting to remind their daughter that an anniversary like that was something she should remember on her own. But Tina was in no mood to listen to reason. A tide of self-pity washed over her. Seeing their only daughter so heartbroken, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, despite knowing Tina was in the wrong, couldn't help but call Jason. Jason, dear, would you like to come over for dinner? I made your favorite vegetable porridge. Tina's here, too. You two can go home together afterward? Mrs. Smith asked tentatively. There was a moment of silence on the phone before Jason replied, Mom, I'm being discharged this afternoon, and there's a mountain of work at the office waiting for me. I can't make it. Tina's face paled, and she threw the remote control in her hand. Then don't you ever come to my house again. She was throwing a tantrum, but her mother knew that 8 years had exhausted Jason's passion and patience. He was probably serious about giving up on Tina, but Tina hadn't realized it yet. On the other end, Jason hung up the phone and placed the lilies Tina had left in his arms on his parents' tombstone. He had heard Tina's angry shout through his mother-in-law's phone, and for a moment, he felt a bit dazed. It seemed like he had never made Tina this upset before. But Tina wasn't the only one who was hurt and wronged. He wasn't made of steel either. A cold, mocking look flickered in Jason's eyes as he wheeled himself out of the cemetery. In the afternoon, his assistant handed him a form. "Sir, the discharge papers are all set." Jason grunted. "Let's go." But a mocking voice came from ahead. Well, getting discharged already? Why not stay a few more days?" Jason looked up and met Shawn's unabashedly provocative gaze. "Heard today was the anniversary of your parents' death?" Shawn stood a few feet away, smiling. "Sorry, Tina was so busy taking care of me she forgot. Hope it didn't mess up your visit to the cemetery." Jason's face instantly turned cold. The assistant bodyguard behind him took a step forward, his hand gripping Shawn's shoulder. But his good upbringing made Jason swallow his anger. He looked at Shawn and said coldly, "Instead of provoking me, why don't you go improve yourself? Other than a face that looks like your brother's, what else do you have?" Compared to Ethan, Shawn was indeed a good for nothing. His business sense was inferior, his painting skills were worse, and he even had to use his brother's name to hold an exhibition. But no failure likes to be called a failure. Shawn's face turned ugly. Then he laughed again, his voice filled with malice. "And you? You have the family background, the money, the status, everything. But have you won Tina's heart? As for me," he said, pointing to his face, "all I need is a face that looks like my brother's." Before the cold-faced Jason could react, Shawn caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye and lunged forward. The bodyguard protecting Jason instinctively kicked out. Shawn's body flew through the air. At the same time, Tina's shocked, furious shout came from nearby. "Jason, what are you doing?" Tina was angry, but the thought of Jason being discharged from the hospital today made her hesitate for a long time before she finally rushed over. She never expected to see Jason ordering his bodyguard to hit someone. Tina immediately dropped the roses in her hand, rushed to help Shawn up, and turned to Jason, fuming. "Jason, you are being completely unreasonable." It had been a long time since anyone had played such a clumsy trick on Jason. He couldn't be bothered to argue. "You can call the police." Shawn's expression shifted slightly. "No need," he said quickly. "Tina, I'm sure Jason didn't mean it." "I'm fine." As he spoke, he winced, pressing a hand to his back and sucking in a sharp breath. Then, from an angle Tina couldn't see, he mouthed a silent challenge to Jason. "Who do you think she'll believe?" Tina's face was grim. She shot Jason a cold look, then helped Shawn up. "Shawn, I'll take you to the clinic to get checked out." "Thank you, Tina." Before leaving, Shawn cast a subtle, triumphant glance at Jason. Jason ignored him. No amount of provocation or insult could compare to the daggers Tina casually threw at him. If Tina trusted him, how could Shawn's little trick have succeeded? In the end, whenever it came to anything related to Ethan, Tina would unconditionally side with the other person. Even if that person wasn't Ethan, just his brother. Jason remained where he was, his gaze shifting from Tina's retreating back to the scattered roses on the ground. A breeze blew past, and rose petals clung precariously to the stems, just like their crumbling marriage. Jason mouthed silently, "Tina, this is the 7th time." After that, their relationship plunged to a freezing point. Tina stayed away from home in a huff, and Jason started living at the office. Being hospitalized for a month had put him behind on a lot of work, and he spent the next few days working day and night. After all, even if his personal life was a mess, life had to go on. His personal phone buzzed. Shawn had sent him a photo of himself with Tina, but he quickly retracted it. Then Jason saw Shawn's new social media post. "Thanks, Tina, for taking care of me when I was sick." The accompanying picture was of Shawn in a hospital bed, with Tina feeding him porridge. The image was intimate, jarring. Jason looked at it, but felt nothing. He knew Tina only loved Ethan. No one else, including himself, could ever catch her eye. But not long after, that belief was shattered. After half a month of non-stop work, Jason finally cleared his desk and went to the hospital for a follow-up. "Your post-op recovery is looking good. Starting today, you need to do physical therapy every day." Hearing the doctor's advice, Jason thought for a moment and decided to go home. He couldn't live at the office forever. Besides, they had a physical therapy room at home which would be more convenient. But as soon as he opened the front door, Jason froze. In the middle of the living room, his wife, whom he hadn't seen in ages, was kissing another man. Hearing the noise, the two of them slowly turned their heads. Tina's eyes were still hazy with passion, her expression dazed. Slowly, she sobered up, and her face turned deathly pale. She shoved Shawn away and looked at Jason, completely at a loss. "Honey." Jason turned and walked away. A wave of panic hit Tina. She quickly chased after him and grabbed his arm. "Honey, let me explain." Jason stopped, his expression cold. "Fine. Explain." Tina's face was white. I thought Shawn was Ethan, that's why." Jason took a deep breath, so angry he almost laughed. He pointed at Shawn. "So if that was really Ethan standing here today, you would have kissed him? Slept with him? Tina, do you have any idea that you're married?" Seeing the evasive look in Tina's eyes, Jason thought, I was wrong after all. Shawn really just needed his face. Never before had Jason felt so defeated. He pressed a hand to his chest. He thought he was numb, so why did it still hurt so much? Jason didn't want to spend another second in this so-called home. He slowly pried Tina's hands off his arm and strode out the door. But Shawn blocked his path, his eyes full of remorse. "Jason, I'm sorry. I just like Tina so much, so I dressed up like my brother to seduce her. It's all my fault. Don't blame her. It has nothing to do with her." Hearing his words, Jason found it laughable. His gaze went past Shawn to the pale-faced Tina behind him, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. "He looks like Ethan, so you mistook them?" Jason pointed at Shawn. "This man is despicable, shameless, and has ulterior motives. He's nothing but a clown trying to imitate a master, and you mistook him? Then your love for Ethan must not be that great after all." Or, Jason said, looking at Tina coldly, "Was Ethan also a despicable, shameless man just like his brother, which is why you could mistake one for the other?" Her answer was a sharp slap across his face. Smack. Jason turned his head to the side, the taste of blood in his mouth. The panic in Tina's eyes was gone, replaced by a raw hatred. Her voice was as cold as ice. "Don't you dare talk about Ethan like that." The look in her eyes suggested that if Jason said one more bad word about Ethan, she would kill him. Jason closed his eyes. It was the first time Tina had ever hit him. The burning pain on his cheek was nothing compared to the agony in his heart. "Tina, this is the 8th time. This is the last time," Jason said silently. For a reason she couldn't explain, a flicker of panic shot through Tina's heart, as if from this moment on, she would lose something forever. But that fleeting panic was quickly consumed by a boiling rage. She trembled with anger, completely irrational. She had long forgotten what Jason's 8 times meant, or if she remembered, she didn't care. "Jason apologized to Ethan," Tina said coldly. Even now, all she could think about was Ethan. A metallic taste filled Jason's mouth. He tugged at the corner of his lips, but his eyes were red. He finally said what he had been suppressing for so long. "Tina, let's get a divorce." Tina froze for a second. Then, in a fit of rage, she made a decision she would regret for the rest of her life. "Fine, let's get a divorce." No one could insult Ethan, not even her husband. Hearing her words, Jason wiped the blood from his lips. The moment he proposed divorce, it was as if he had shed all his miserable emotions. He expressionlessly pulled the divorce papers from his bag. "Then sign it." Tina didn't even stop to wonder why Jason had the papers prepared in advance. She scribbled her name, then turned and left, wrapped in an icy fury. Jason didn't chase her, letting the distance between them grow. Shawn didn't immediately follow Tina either. Instead, he lowered his voice and said to Jason, "You were easier to beat than I thought." Jason looked up at him. "Get lost." When Shawn saw the fury raging in his eyes, he was so frightened he took a step back, then fled in a panic. Jason stood in the yard for a long time without moving. After a while, he took a deep breath of the cold air, but it only choked out a flood of tears. He had said those things about Ethan on purpose, just to see if Tina would, for the sake of their teetering marriage, hold back even a fraction of her hysteria. The result was obvious. Ethan was like a curse controlling Tina, a curse that Jason Kent could never break. Jason began to silently pack his things. He was leaving the house to Tina, so he couldn't leave any of his belongings behind. But 8 years was a long time. The home they had carefully built was filled with traces of his life. It took Jason a long time to clean and pack everything up. Finally, his hand rested on an old, faded metal charm, the first gift Tina had ever given him. At that time, Jason's parents had just died in a car crash. Having lost his support system, he had fallen from grace and become an orphan everyone could bully. Jason remembered how difficult those days were. Relatives tried to snatch his inheritance. Classmates started ostracizing him for some reason, and former friends turned on him. In his darkest hour, it was Tina who had reached out to him. "Hey Jason, if no one wants to be your friend, I will. From now on, I've got your back." The girl's smile was radiant under the sun. Seeing Jason look over, she scratched her head, thought for a moment, and took a charm off her backpack, handing it to him with a grin that revealed 2 little canine teeth. "Here, a friendship gift." The seed of love was planted then and there. Jason accepted it and cherished it for many years. Staring at the charm in his hand now, Jason finally put it in the box. As the box was sealed, it felt as if the heart that had loved Tina for more than a decade was sealed away with it. When everything was packed, Jason took one last look at the home where he had lived for 8 years. Then he turned and walked away without hesitation, his figure receding into the distance. Jason moved into one of the apartments he owned. He knew it would take a long time to recover from this broken marriage. But from the moment he gave up on Tina, he would never look back. Meanwhile, Tina returned to her parents' house and smashed everything Jason had ever given her. Limited edition figurines shattered into dust. A custom guitar was splintered into pieces. Their wedding photo was torn to shreds. Shawn, secretly pleased, put on a guilty expression and tried to stop her. "Tina, it's all my fault. Please don't do this." Tina ignored him, raising her hand and smashing their matching couple's mugs against the wall. "What's going on?" Mr. and Mrs. Smith rushed in at the sound of the commotion. Shawn's eyes flickered, and he stammered, "It's Jason. He said bad things about my brother." And Tina got so angry she signed the divorce papers. "What?" Mrs. Smith's face turned pale. She quickly picked up the document from the table, and her face seemed to age years in an instant. Her daughter and son-in-law had finally reached this point. "Tina," Mrs. Smith couldn't help but stop her. "Stop throwing a tantrum. Go talk to Jason. If she went now, there might still be a chance to fix things." But Tina's eyes were cold. "Don't mention his name to me." On the second day of their separation, Tina spent the entire day in her messy bedroom, clutching a photo of Ethan, thinking she would never forgive Jason. On the third day, Tina saw the divorce papers in the living room. Her pupils constricted as she finally remembered that Jason had asked for a divorce. Her heart trembled, then her face hardened again. She tore the papers to shreds and threw them in the trash, sending Jason a message. "Don't think you can scare me by asking for a divorce." It wasn't she who couldn't live without him, it was he who couldn't live without her. On the fourth day, Tina fished the divorce papers out of the trash, staring blankly at the dense text, wondering how she and Jason had ended up here. That wasn't what she had wanted that day. They had been in a cold war for a month. Tina had never been apart from Jason for so long, and when her husband didn't come looking for her, she finally couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to make peace. But she was too proud to make the first move. Just then, Shawn mentioned he wanted to see a painting of Ethan's that she had in her collection at home. So Tina brought him home, thinking it would be a good chance to see what Jason was up to and persuade him to make peace with Shawn. After all, they were both important people to her. She didn't want any bad blood between them. But when they got home, Jason wasn't there. After looking at the painting, Shawn secretly changed into a set of Ethan's old clothes that Tina kept carefully stored in a closet. Shawn already looked 70% like his brother. When he stood before Tina dressed in Ethan's clothes, she thought her deceased love had come back to life. From there, everything spiraled out of control. She kissed Shawn, And then Jason saw them. Remembering this, Tina felt a pang of guilt. She admitted that no one could stay rational after seeing their partner kissing someone else. But Jason shouldn't have insulted Ethan like that. This was her mistake, it had nothing to do with Ethan. On the 5th day, Tina got herself together and headed home. She would apologize to Jason. She would tell him she had no intention of cheating. That kiss was an accident. But Jason also had to apologize to Ethan. With her speech prepared, Tina pushed open the door to a quiet, empty house. Jason, she paused, muttering, "Isn't it the weekend? Did he go to work?" She went upstairs and opened the study door. Then she froze, staring at the empty desk. Jason's work computer and the files on his desk and shelves were all gone. Tina finally realized what was happening, and a wave of unease washed over her. "Honey?" She rushed into the bedroom, her pace quickening. When she saw that all of Jason's belongings were gone, the unease turned into panic. Was Jason really divorcing her? No, he wouldn't. Tina's head was buzzing. For a moment, she couldn't hear a thing. Even though Jason had taken all his things, she still couldn't believe he would leave her. He must be really angry, so he's trying this to make me give in. Just like when I run away from home to make him coax me. Yes, that must be it. Jason loves me so much, he would never really divorce me. Tina muttered to herself as she pulled out her phone to call Jason. As the phone rang, her heart settled, and she even felt a little exasperated. "TSK, why is Jason copying my move of running away from home? And he's not even doing it right. If you want to torture someone, you should block all their contact methods." But after a few rings, the automated voice telling her the line was busy made the smile on her face freeze. Jason had intentionally declined her call. When she tried again, her number was blocked. Tina's hands began to shake. She opened her message thread with Jason. "Honey." But she was met with a glaring red exclamation mark. A thick wave of anxiety, stronger than any emotion she'd felt before, washed over her. Tina started running, heading straight for Jason's company. She didn't need Jason to apologize to Ethan anymore. She would apologize properly to Jason. But at the company, the receptionist stopped her. "I'm sorry, Miss Smith. You can't go up without an appointment." Tina froze. Every time she came before, she had taken the private executive elevator straight up to Jason's office. The anxiety in her heart grew. She couldn't help but insist. "I'm your CEO's wife." "Yes," the receptionist said with a polite smile. "Mr. Kent has instructed that he is not seeing anyone for the time being, including you. Besides, he's out of town on a business trip and isn't in the office." "You?" the receptionist asked curiously. "You didn't know?" Tina's mouth opened, but no words came out. In the past, Jason would always tell her where he was going and bring back a gift. But now, she didn't even know when he had left the city. If Jason was trying to scare her with this, Tina thought he was succeeding. She was truly afraid. Tina bit her lip and dialed Jason's secretary and assistant, but both calls went straight to a blocked notification. Unable to contact him and not knowing when he would be back, she decided to wait in the company lobby. She waited for 2 days straight, but Jason never returned. Tina was in agony. She suddenly remembered all the times she had run away from home after an argument. Was this how Jason felt, waiting for her? A dull, indescribable ache spread through her heart. She thought, from now on, no matter what happens, I will never just run away from home again. 3 days later, Tina finally saw him. Jason saw her too. The next second, he stopped in his tracks. "Can I help you?" Those polite, distant words made the smile on Tina's face falter, but she still walked up to him and reached out to take his hand. "Honey, I'm here to take you home." Jason sidestepped her touch. "Tina, we've already signed the divorce papers." His voice was soft, but Tina saw the finality in his eyes. If before she could console herself by thinking Jason was just throwing a tantrum and trying to make a point, now, looking into his eyes, she understood. Jason wasn't trying to divorce her out of anger or disappointment. He truly, completely, didn't want her anymore. "Jason, we don't have to do this. I never wanted a real divorce." The smile on Tina's face was more painful than tears. To this day, She still couldn't understand why Jason had suddenly changed so much. They had fought and argued before, but didn't they always make up in the end? I know you're mad at me. She began to ramble, apologizing. I shouldn't have kissed Shawn that day, and I shouldn't have hit you. I didn't mean to. I'll learn to control my temper, you. Tina. Jason interrupted her softly. Go home. Tina's voice caught in her throat. Jason looked at her. My lawyer, from Rhodes Associates, will be in touch with you about the divorce proceedings. If you have any further questions, you can contact him directly. With that, Jason turned to leave. His eyes were bloodshot and he had dark circles under them. Not just from working on proposals all night, but more so from sleepless nights. Giving up on Tina was painful, but Jason never looked back. Left behind, Tina understood his words. It meant they shouldn't see each other again. The finality in his eyes was so absolute that she could only watch as he entered the elevator and disappeared behind the doors, too afraid to take a single step after him. She left, completely dejected. The blow was so great that Tina seemed to wither. She lost interest in everything and stayed at home day and night, like a doll that had lost its shine. When Shawn came to visit, he barely recognized her. In just a few days, Tina had lost so much weight that anyone who didn't know better would think she had a terminal illness. Tina, Shawn asked with concern, what's wrong? Seeing him, Tina was reminded of the kiss that had triggered the whole chain of events. Shawn was one of the main culprits behind the collapse of her marriage. If Shawn hadn't pretended to be his brother to seduce her, maybe she and Jason wouldn't be in this situation. So Tina didn't really want to see him. But he was still Ethan's brother, and anything related to Ethan always got special treatment from her. I'm fine, Tina replied, mustering some patience, though her tone lacked its previous warmth. What are you doing here? I found another one of my brother's paintings. It's with a university professor here in the country, Shawn said, his eyes bright. He invited her. Tina, want to go with me? Ethan had been somewhat famous as a painter before he died, and many people had bought his work. After his death, one of Tina's hobbies was to buy back all the paintings he had sold and treasure them herself. She had traveled to many places for this purpose. But what used to excite her now failed to spark any joy. Tina just said, oh, feeling too lazy to move. After a long hesitation, she finally stood up. Let's go. Tina thought the painting was out of town and they would need to fly. But Shawn took her to a private room in a nightclub. When she saw the men and women waiting inside, Tina was surprised and a little annoyed. Her voice turned cold. Didn't you say you were taking me to see a painting? Because I already bought it back, Shawn said, gesturing for Tina to look at the wall in the center of the room. He snapped his fingers, and a light came on, illuminating the oil painting on the wall. When she saw the painting's subject, Tina's eyes widened in surprise. It was a painting Ethan had made of her, running on a track field. Tina had been looking for this painting for a long time. Tina, do you like the gift? Shawn asked, moving closer to her. Tina nodded instinctively. Then this painting is for you, to congratulate you on being single again, Shawn said with a smile. Hearing his words, Tina's expression changed. But Shawn didn't notice. His eyes gleamed with a sense of triumph as he continued, Jason Kent isn't good enough for you. You'll meet someone better. Yeah, the others in the room chimed in. That Jason Kent was just a dog you kept around. He was never worthy of you, Miss Smith. How dare he divorce you? He should take a good look at himself. Just get rid of a disobedient dog like that. With a wave of your hand, Miss Smith, you could have countless more obedient ones. As they were talking, a loud bang echoed through the room. Tina had kicked over the coffee table, her voice as sharp as a knife. Who did you just call a dog? A dead silence fell over the room. Tina's gaze, cold enough to freeze, swept over everyone present. Then she reached out and punched the man who had been the most vocal in his insults. The man let out a piercing scream, clutching his face, angry but too scared to retaliate. Tina ignored him, her gaze finally landing on Shawn. Who told you I was single? Shawn's smile faltered. Tina, don't be angry. Before you take matters into your own hands, you'd better consider if you have the right, Tina said, giving no one any face when she was furious. As Shawn's face turned pale, she said coldly, "Jason and I only signed the divorce papers. We haven't finalized it. We're still married. And you're bad-mouthing him in front of me? And even if we do get divorced, who the hell are you to talk about him like that?" The room was dead silent. No one dared to make a sound. These people were several rungs below Tina on the social ladder. They had come today hoping to suck up to her after hearing about her divorce, but they had clearly miscalculated. Shawn's lips trembled, but he couldn't get a word out. He never thought Tina would embarrass him so publicly. Felt like he'd been slapped across the face. "Tina," he started, reaching for her hand, but she slapped it away. Ignoring him, she turned to the others and said coldly, "Every single one of you here today, this isn't over." Everyone's face changed. The man who had been punched, the son of some company's vice president, finally couldn't take it anymore and sneered at Tina. "Weren't you the one who treated Mr. Kent like he was nothing? So why are you so outraged now? Everyone in NYC knows your one true love is Ethan Carter. As for Mr. Kent, when we called him a dog, wasn't it because you treated him like one you could summon and dismiss at will? Remember that Kent family banquet? You threw a fit at Mr. Kent in front of everyone because of Ethan and left him to clean up the mess. Have you forgotten? You're the one who degraded him, so who are you trying to fool with this deep love act?" The man looked at Tina with disgust. "If we weren't trying to suck up to you, who would want to badmouth him? We'd kill to be associated with a catch like that, but he was blind enough to fall for you. If you ask me, you're the one who's not good enough. Mr. Kent is divorcing you, and you deserve it." Now it was Tina's expression that changed. Her face grew paler and paler with each sharp, angry accusation. "No," Tina shook her head, muttering. "I didn't." She couldn't finish because she knew everything he said was true. The man's thunderous shouts were like a wake-up call. Memories flooded back like a movie reel. She remembered the banquet where she lost her temper at Jason in front of all the guests because he had accidentally broken a brooch Ethan had given her. She had stormed out, leaving him to face the humiliation alone. And another time, at a family dinner, she had thrown down her chopsticks and cursed out everyone, including Jason and his elders, because one of them had commented that Ethan's painting wasn't that special. And things like this had happened more than once or twice. She had publicly embarrassed Jason many times because of Ethan. She had said countless hurtful things to him in private because of Ethan. Remembering all of this, Tina staggered backward, on the verge of collapsing. She finally understood why Jason wanted to divorce her. Ethan had died when she loved him most. She couldn't forget Ethan, so she demanded that Jason understand. Jason had actually always been considerate of her feelings. He would go with her to visit Ethan's grave, help her find Ethan's paintings. He had done more than enough. But she was never satisfied, constantly hurting him over and over again because of Ethan. Who could tolerate a partner like that? Tina collapsed to the floor, her throat constricting in a sudden spasm. Didn't she understand this before? She had always understood. But born with a silver spoon, Tina had been coddled by her parents, spoiled by Ethan, and then indulged by Jason. She was completely ruined. She was selfish and willful, never considering anyone else's feelings. The reason she could trample on Jason's feelings so recklessly was because she was confident in his love. And now, she had pushed him until his love was completely exhausted, and he had finally let her go. In the private room, a sob choked in Tina's throat. She knew it wasn't Shawn. It wasn't Ethan. It was she, Tina, who had lost Jason. Tina didn't know how she left the club. She was in a daze. When she came to her senses, she found herself standing outside Jason's apartment. She raised her hand but didn't dare to knock. The fact that things had come to this was ultimately because she hadn't cared enough, hadn't loved Jason enough in the past, which was why she could trample on his feelings without a second thought. But now that he had left her, Tina belatedly realized that she was the one who couldn't let go. The memories of how she had treated Jason flashed through her mind. The more she remembered, the less courage she had to face him. Inside, Jason, who was working, received a notification on his phone that someone was loitering outside his door. He paused, opened the security feed, and saw Tina crouching on the ground. Jason's expression flickered. A moment later, he closed the feed and went back to his work. 10 p.m., he checked the feed again. Tina was still there. Jason frowned but still didn't do anything. At 11 p.m., the building's security guard came up to check on the situation. Jason pinched the bridge of his nose, called Tina's family driver to come pick her up, and then opened the door. "Can I help you?" Startled by the voice, Tina looked up. When she saw Jason, she was at a loss for words, instinctively calling out, "Honey." Jason pressed his lips together. Legally, they were still married until the divorce was finalized, so he didn't correct her. He just asked again, "Can I help you?" Tina looked like a child who had done something wrong. Her eyes red. "Honey, I know why you want to divorce me. I promise I won't get angry with you because of Ethan anymore. I was too selfish before. I never considered your feelings. I'll change. I love you. Can we not get a divorce?" Jason was stunned. He hadn't expected Tina to say something like that. In the past, hearing her say she loved him would have made him overjoyed, maybe even moved him to tears. But now, with his passion exhausted, he only felt a faint sense of melancholy. He looked at Tina and asked, "You love me? Then what about Ethan?" Tina froze. An almost imperceptible hint of mockery flashed in Jason's eyes. "Tina, a person's heart is only the size of a fist. It's too crowded for two people." A flicker of conflict crossed Tina's face. But seeing Jason about to close the door, she rushed to stop him. "What if I let Ethan go?" Jason didn't answer. Instead, he took out his phone and played a video for her. It was the scene of Tina smashing the things he had given her in their bedroom. "Shawn sent this to me. Tina, some things, once broken, can never be put back together. Even if you manage to piece them together, the scars remain impossible to heal." The light in Tina's eyes quickly dimmed. She wanted to explain, but found she had nothing to say. She was the one who had smashed everything. She was the one who had pushed him away, little by little. She really did deserve this. Tears streamed down Tina's face. In a pleading tone, she asked, "Jason, can you give me one last chance?" Jason had seen Tina cry many times, but her tears were always for Ethan. This was the first time Tina had cried so heartbrokenly for him. His feelings were complicated, an indescribable taste spreading on his tongue. After a long moment, he said, "Tina, I gave you 8 chances. Not 1, not 2, but 8. And what had Tina done?" Tina's face turned deathly pale. She had never taken Jason's words to heart. In fact, when he had proposed the 8 chances, she had found it ridiculous. And how had she treated him? She had yelled at him on his birthday over a worthless bowl. She had ditched him at a gala to pick up Shawn. She had risked his life to save one of Ethan's paintings. The pain she had inflicted in the past finally came back to haunt her like a boomerang. Tina was speechless. Silence fell. Jason didn't say anything more to the stunned Tina. After a while, when he saw the Smith family driver arrive, he turned, went back inside, and closed the door. Tina watched the door slowly shut in front of her. It was such a short distance, yet she felt as if a chasm had opened up between her and Jason, one that she might never be able to cross. After the fiasco at the club, news of Jason and Tina's impending divorce spread through their social circles. Fortunately, Jason had prepared a PR plan, so the stocks of Kent Enterprises and Smith Industries weren't greatly affected, and the two companies maintained a friendly partnership. The transition was relatively smooth. But once it was clear the divorce was a done deal, Jason's family started trying to set him up with new people. Tina also continued to seek him out, again and again. Overwhelmed, Jason arranged a series of business trips to avoid them all. This time, Jason went to Boston. There, they were to discuss an anti-cancer drug development project with Viridian Pharmaceuticals. Before going, Jason had researched extensively and had a general understanding of his negotiating counterparts. But when he arrived at the negotiation, Jason found that Viridian had a new person in charge. "I apologize, I didn't expect Mr. Kent to come in person," a tall, poised woman said, extending her hand to Jason. "To show our respect, I've been brought in to handle this discussion." I'm Vivian Sterling, the CEO of Viridian Pharmaceuticals. Last-minute changes in negotiations were common. Jason had no issue with it. He nodded slightly and shook Vivian's hand politely. Hello. After greetings, both sides took their seats and began the formal talks. Kent Enterprises wanted Viridian to share the core technology of a particular anti-cancer drug so they could merge their labs and co-develop it. Both sides had already agreed on this point, but they couldn't reach a consensus on the investment capital and profit sharing. Though his personal life was a mess, it didn't affect Jason's ability as a corporate leader. He rarely spoke during the negotiation, but when he did, his words were sharp and to the point, leaving little room for rebuttal. The Viridian team was equally formidable. Their CEO, Vivian Sterling, was assertive and sharp-tongued, a tough opponent. By the afternoon, they finally reached an agreement. After signing the contract, Vivian dropped her assertive demeanor, looked up at Jason, and invited, Mr. Kent, you've come all this way. Why don't you let me be a good host and treat you to dinner? It was common to have a meal together after closing a deal. Jason didn't think much of it and agreed. It wasn't until they arrived at the restaurant and he saw it was just the two of them that he paused. I've arranged for the rest of your team to be elsewhere, Vivian explained, pulling out a chair. I have some business matters I'd like to ask your advice on, and it's more convenient to talk one-on-one. Her explanation was flawless, and Jason couldn't find a reason to object, so he sat down. As he flipped through the menu, his eyes casually glanced to the side and saw Tina, her eyes red, sitting not far away. Jason pinched the bridge of his nose. He didn't understand. Tina was such a proud person, so why was she willing to swallow her pride and chase after him now? But it was too late. He didn't want to go back. The 8 years with Tina had been exhausting. After they separated, he felt a sense of relief. But Tina's current behavior brought back that old feeling of helplessness and fatigue. Vivian also saw Tina and asked casually, I hear you and your wife are getting a divorce? Jason was a little surprised that Vivian knew about this gossip. He pulled his gaze back from Tina and admitted, yes. The meal was impossible to continue. Jason said apologetically, I'm sorry, I have to deal with a personal matter. I'll treat you next time. Vivian smiled understandingly. Of course. Let's exchange contact information. They added each other on a messaging app, and Vivian left first. Jason walked toward Tina. Watching the two of them smiling and talking, Tina clenched her fists. It was just a normal conversation, but the scene was incredibly jarring to her. And if this made her feel so uncomfortable, what must Jason have felt for 8 years watching her love another man? The more Tina thought about how she had treated Jason in the past, the less confident she felt. So when Jason walked toward her, her voice was barely a whisper from guilt. Honey, Tina, Jason said calmly. If I wasn't clear before, let me state my position now. The decision to divorce wasn't an impulse. It was something I thought about for a long time. I'm not going back. I want to move forward, and I hope you do too. So, Jason paused, then said softly, stop chasing after someone from the past. With that, Jason left. Tina wanted to follow, but she saw Vivian, who had just left, return. She waved her car keys at Jason. Need a ride? Those words made Tina freeze in her tracks. Jason and Vivian had just met today. They weren't close enough for her to offer him a ride. But the thought of having to face Tina if he stayed made Jason nod. Yes, thank you. Watching the two of them walk away side by side, Tina stood frozen. A stubborn look slowly forming on her face as she muttered, I won't give up. Tina. Shawn's voice suddenly came from ahead. Tina frowned at him. Are you following me? Shawn's smile faltered. No, your parents were worried about you and asked me to check on you. Hearing this, Tina's expression softened slightly. I'm fine. You can go back now. Shawn bit his lip and didn't move. Ever since they had parted ways at the club, Tina had been giving him the cold shoulder. No matter how much he apologized or tried to please her, it was no use. And because he had taken it upon himself to invite their social circle to a single party for Tina, only for her to blow up at them, everyone who had been there now blamed him and had cut ties with him. These were all clients Tina had introduced to him. Out of respect for Tina, they would all buy a few of his works. Now that things had soured, no one was interested in his art. His situation was dire, yet here was Tina, still chasing after her ex-husband. Didn't this woman love my brother the most? A flash of hatred crossed Shawn's eyes, but his tone became even softer. Tina, I was thinking of holding another art exhibition for my brother. What do you think? Something that once would have excited her now failed to spark any interest. Tina replied dismissively, we'll see. Before Shawn could say anything more, Tina strode away. She was in a hurry to find a way to get Jason back. Meanwhile, after the deal was made, Viridian proposed sending a representative to tour Kent Enterprises. Jason, of course, had no objections. But when he saw that the representative was Vivian Sterling, he was surprised. You're going, Ms. Sterling? Usually, a company would send a VP or someone of a lower rank for such a visit. It was rare for a CEO like Vivian to go herself. If Vivian went, Jason would have to host her personally out of respect. Yes, Vivian nodded, looking at Jason. Is that a problem, Mr. Kent? Not at all, Jason smiled. It was just that he had planned to take a vacation for himself, but now those plans would have to be postponed. Back in NYC, to be a good host, Jason arranged for dinner at one of the city's most exclusive private kitchens to welcome Vivian and her team. Making up for the meal we missed last time, Jason said with a smile during dinner. And thank you for the other day, Ms. Sterling. They both knew what he was thanking her for. Vivian nodded, accepting his gratitude. You're too kind, Mr. Kent. After the meal, they became more familiar with each other and dropped the formal talk. As they chatted about everything from business to local culture, Vivian suddenly said, I hear there's a very spiritual old temple in NYC. I wonder if Mr. Kent would have time to show me around? Jason's hand paused. Vivian's meaning was clear. Not us, but me. Not for him to send someone, but for him to go personally. A strange feeling crept into Jason's heart. He couldn't help but meet Vivian's gaze. She looked back at him frankly and explained, My mother isn't well. I want to get a protective charm for her. Maybe I'm overthinking it, Jason thought, shaking his head and agreeing. That afternoon, they went to the temple. Vivian did indeed get a charm. After that, she didn't ask anything more of Jason, and they said their goodbyes at her hotel. Mr. Kent, I hope Kent Enterprises and Viridian can foster more collaborations in the future, Vivian said as she got out of the car. Jason was very interested in many of Viridian's pharmaceutical technologies. He nodded. I hope so too. Then I'll see you around. After Jason left, Vivian looked at another car parked not far away. A moment later, Tina, who had been following them the whole time, got out, her face cold. The two women faced each other across the steps. Tina's eyes were hostile. I never thought the CEO of the great Viridian Pharmaceuticals would stoop to something as shameless as seducing another woman's husband. But Vivian's expression was calm. She met Tina's gaze and said, Don't worry. I won't make any moves until Jason is single again. This woman was actually interested in Jason. Tina clenched her fists, a huge sense of crisis washing over her. But her face became even more hostile as she bluff-fed. Then you won't get the chance. Vivian smiled and didn't argue. Instead, she asked, I hear you're deeply in love with a man named Ethan Carter. So what place does Jason hold in your heart? Without waiting for an answer, Vivian's eyes filled with a hint of mockery. I don't know if I'll have a chance, but I do know that people who are greedy and want everything end up with nothing. With that, Vivian turned and left, leaving Tina with a pale, ugly expression on her face. Left behind, her face ashen from the verbal jab, Tina thought, I have to find a way to win Jason back, and fast. So, the next day, when Jason came home from work, he once again found Tina at his door. Jason turned to leave. If he ignored her a few times, a proud person like Tina would naturally give up. But Tina blocked his path and held out a medical report. Honey, I have terminal cancer. The news was so sudden that Jason couldn't process it. Tina's words were like a clap of thunder on a clear day. Jason was shaken. His eyes instinctively fell on the report. The results showed that Tina had mid-stage stomach cancer. Tina touched her stomach sorrowfully and explained in a low voice, I've been having stomach pains and feeling nauseous lately. I went to the hospital for a checkup and found out I have stomach cancer. 10 minutes later, Tina was inside Jason's apartment. Jason poured her a glass of warm water. He stared at her, still finding it hard to believe. He never thought Tina would get such a serious illness. Tina's stomach had always been a bit weak, but he had been helping her manage it carefully. But now, besides being shocked, Jason also felt at a loss. This illness was completely unexpected. To be honest, Jason was very worried about Tina, but their marriage was already at its end. Should he still divorce her? Jason fell silent. After a long time, he looked at Tina and asked, "What's your plan? Do you want to get treatment here or go abroad?" Mid-stage stomach cancer was manageable. With proper and timely treatment, a full recovery wasn't out of the question. "Let's do it here," Tina said immediately. "The hospital under Smith Industries has already come up with several treatment plans, but I'm still a little scared." She looked pitiful, her eyes filled with a hopeful, tentative look. "Honey, can we put the divorce on hold for now? I want you by my side." But Jason shook his head, giving her the answer he had been considering for a long time. "Whether you get treatment here or abroad, I will visit you regularly and be with you until you've beaten this and recovered." He paused. "But Tina, I've still decided to go through with the divorce." The 8-year marriage had left Jason mentally and emotionally exhausted. The pain Tina had caused him was too deep. He hadn't completely let go of her, but he didn't want a future with her either. The moment his disappointment had peaked, his heart had turned to ash. Jason thought that perhaps they should both have new lives. Tina bit her lip, not expecting that even faking cancer wouldn't change Jason's mind. "Honey," she managed to suppress her disappointment and didn't push further, instead taking a step back. "I have a checkup tomorrow. Can you come with me?" Jason agreed. Tina smiled and didn't stay long. It was okay if she couldn't change his mind now. As long as they had enough time together, she was confident she could soften him up and get him to come back. Besides, public opinion was a powerful force. Once news of her cancer got out, people online would help persuade Jason to come home. After all, in a situation like this, the support of family was most important. The next day, Jason accompanied Tina to her checkup. Vivian was also leaving that day. At the hotel entrance, she glanced into the distance and couldn't help but ask, "Where's your CEO?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Kent has something to attend to today and couldn't see you off," Jason's assistant explained, bowing slightly. "He asked me to convey his apologies." A flash of disappointment crossed Vivian's eyes. She said nothing and boarded her flight home. She looked forward to her next meeting with Jason, but then the news that Tina had cancer and that netizens were calling for Jason to go back to her exploded on social media. When Vivian saw it, her expression turned icy, and she crushed her phone screen in her hand. The phone screen cracked like a spiderweb. Every word in the headlines was like a needle stabbing into Vivian's eyes. Her eyes stung. Am I going to lose my chance again? She wouldn't accept it. But if Tina really had a terminal illness, it was understandable that Jason would want to go back to her. But whether Jason went back was his own business. The public shouldn't be morally blackmailing him like this. Vivian pressed her lips together and called her assistant. "Contact a few marketing accounts." She stopped mid-sentence, a realization dawning on her. She carefully reread all the headlines about Tina and Jason. She noticed the wording in all the posts was very similar, clearly the work of a single source. An idea sparked in Vivian's mind. She told her assistant, "Never mind the marketing accounts. Find out who bought the trending topics related to Jason Kent." The assistant went to do her bidding. Soon after, Vivian received a report. A third-tier actress in the entertainment industry, who happened to be Tina's cousin, had paid for the campaign. Vivian tapped her fingers on the desk, then forwarded the screenshots her assistant sent to Jason. 5 minutes later, she called him. "Did you see the pictures I sent?" Jason pinched the bridge of his nose. "Yes." "I'm sorry. This might be overstepping," Vivian said, choosing her words carefully. "But I still suggest you investigate who's behind this. And you should also confirm whether your wife really has cancer." Jason hadn't expected to suddenly become a trending topic. He wasn't a public figure. But when it happened, he was only surprised, not suspicious of Tina. In his mind, The proud Tina he knew was someone who disdained lying and deception. So when he saw the news, he had simply ignored it, waiting for the heat to die down. But now, looking at the chat screenshots Vivian sent, Jason had no choice but to believe it. He contacted Tina's cousin. "It was my cousin who asked me to do it." In the cafe, the young woman looked at Jason guiltily. "Jason, why don't you just go back to her? She's only doing this because she loves you so much. You've been married for so many years. What's a conflict you can't resolve?" Jason didn't react to her answer, just said coldly, "Don't tell Tina we met." With that, he got up and left. Outside, the sun was warm, but Jason felt a chill. He had been schemed against by many rivals in business, but he never thought his own wife would plot against him. A surge of anger rose from the bottom of his heart. Jason thought he couldn't be more disappointed in Tina, but he was wrong. Jason held his phone, and after a long moment, made a call. Find out if Tina really has terminal cancer. At the very least, he hoped Tina hadn't stooped so low as to use her own life to deceive him. But the result made Jason's face darken completely. "Mr. Kent, we've investigated. The doctor who did Ms. Smith's examination recently received a $2 million deposit in his account. The transfer was from Ms. Smith. It seems she bribed the doctor to fake the results." Listening to the private investigator's report, Jason suddenly felt like Tina was a stranger. He had felt this way before whenever Tina had one of her hysterical episodes, but never as strongly as now. For so many years, he had tried to heal Tina, to win her heart. But only now did he realize that the bright, sincere, kind, and slightly proud girl he had fallen in love with had probably died along with Ethan. The Tina who remained was a twisted version of herself, obsessive, manipulative, willing to do anything to get what she wanted, regardless of the consequences. He had just been deceiving himself, unwilling to believe it. A dull, indescribable pain washed over Jason. When he saw Tina show up at his door, nonchalantly asking him to accompany her for a checkup, the last shred of affection he had for her vanished. "Honey." Tina, oblivious to Jason's change in demeanor, smiled and reached for his hand. Jason avoided her touch as usual. Tina didn't mind. She knew she couldn't rush things. Lately, Jason's attitude toward her had softened considerably. It wouldn't be long before she could coax him back home. But Tina had a small worry. How would she hide the truth when it was time for chemotherapy? The best plan was to win Jason back before then, and then find a way to spin the lie. She could just have the doctor take the blame, saying they had made a misdiagnosis. As Tina thought this, her smile grew even brighter. "Honey, I have a blood test today. We should go early. Oh, and Mom and Dad miss you a lot. How about we go back for lunch together?" Jason didn't speak or move. He stood at the door, neither letting her in nor preparing to go out, just watching her with cold eyes. He had never realized Tina was such a good actress. Tina finally noticed that something was wrong with Jason's expression. She paused, then met his eyes, and her heart jolted. Her husband's gaze wasn't its usual calm and distant self. It was filled with a terrifying, icy coldness. Tina almost took a step back. A bad feeling welled up inside her. "Honey?" Jason just stared at her, saying nothing. This only amplified Tina's unknown fear and panic, like a sword of Damocles hanging over her head. The atmosphere grew tense. The smile on Tina's face slowly froze. She wanted to say something, but under Jason's gaze, her lips moved several times without making a sound. Just as she was about to break, the sword finally fell. She heard Jason say, "Tina, do you really have stomach cancer?" Tina's pupils constricted. Although Jason was asking a question, his flat, cold tone made it clear he already knew the truth. How could he know? From what Tina knew of Jason, he trusted her unconditionally and would never investigate something like this. Who was it? Who was sabotaging her from behind? A name came to mind. Tina's eyes hardened, and she dodged the question. "Did Vivian Sterling say something to you?" "Honey, that woman has ulterior motives. Don't believe a word she says. Of course I have cancer. You even came with me to the hospital for the tests. How can you not believe me and believe?" Jason frowned, not understanding why Tina had suddenly brought Vivian into this. But he had no more patience to listen to her. He cut her off, his voice heavy. "Tina, let's finalize the divorce tomorrow." He took out his phone and showed her the evidence he had gathered. "Otherwise, I'll release all of this online." Tina had been dragging out the divorce. Jason hoped to use this opportunity to finally draw a clear line between them. His words shattered Tina's last sliver of hope. Her lips trembled as she explained weakly, "Honey, I didn't mean to lie to you. I just wanted you back so badly. I love you." But she trailed off under Jason's gaze. In the past, Tina was confident Jason wouldn't be so ruthless, but now she wasn't so sure. Tina didn't understand. She was trying to get Jason back, so why was she just pushing him further and further away? "You don't love me," Jason said with a humorless smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tina, you're just upset because you lost the person who was at your beck and call for 8 years. If she truly loved him, how could she hurt him over and over again for another man? How could she, when he was making one last desperate attempt to save their marriage, so casually throw away those 8 chances?" Tina shook her head, her eyes red. "No, Jason, it's not like that." Regret completely engulfed her heart. Jason looked at the woman he had once loved so deeply. He had cried and laughed for her, been happy and pained by her. Now all that was gone, replaced by a calm, melancholic sense of what might have been. "Tina," he said finally, "I hope we can part on good terms. I'll be waiting for you at the courthouse tomorrow." But the next day, Tina didn't show up. Instead, Jason received a call from the police. "Is this Mr. Jason Kent? Your wife is threatening to commit suicide. She's on the rooftop of the Paramount building right now. The situation is very dangerous. Please come as soon as you can." When Jason arrived, a crowd had gathered on the roof and the floors below the Paramount building. Tina was standing on the edge of the rooftop, swaying precariously. Nearby, police officers were trying to talk her down, and her parents were pleading with her. But Tina just stared downwards, ignoring them all. It wasn't until Jason arrived that her eyes suddenly lit up. "Honey." Jason was still out of breath. He steadied himself, met Tina's gaze, and asked, "Tina, what are you doing?" Tina's expression was tragic. "Honey, I don't want to divorce you. So you're choosing to force my hand like this?" Jason looked at her, his fists clenched tightly. He had always known that Tina's love for Ethan was extreme and obsessive, a love he had once envied and craved. But now that this extreme emotion was directed at him, he only felt suffocated. In fact, a wave of anger and disgust rose in Jason's heart, especially when the crowd below started shouting at him to go back to her. The feeling reached its peak. "Hey, buddy, what's so bad that you'd push your wife to this? Yeah, your wife is sick. Abandoning her at a time like this is not what a husband should do. You're a cruel man. Are you really going to push your own wife to her death? A beautiful woman like her, you won't find another one." Hearing this, a hint of tenderness appeared in Tina's eyes. "Honey, see? They're all telling you to come back." Threatening him with death and public opinion was her final, desperate move. If Jason had even a shred of feeling left for her, he wouldn't just stand by and watch her die. But Jason said, "Then jump." All the shouts of persuasion stopped abruptly, then erupted with even greater force. "What the hell? What are you talking about? You're still provoking her at a time like this." Mrs. Smith, standing nearby, was so enraged she looked ready to hit him. Tina was stunned. In truth, Jason was more afraid than anyone that Tina would jump. He couldn't bear the weight of someone dying because of him. But the more angry and scared he was, the calmer his expression became. From a few feet away, Jason looked into Tina's disbelieving eyes and repeated, "Jump." Tina's body swayed as she clung to the railing. The crowd gasped, and Mrs. Smith fainted. Only Jason's expression remained unchanged as he faced her. "I thought we had made things clear," he said. Their eyes locked, his voice so calm it was almost cold. "Perhaps you think I still have feelings for you, that I'll miss you, that I'll soften. But Tina, whatever residual feelings I had for you have been completely exhausted by your actions recently. So, for you to threaten me with death today is a bit ridiculous. If there are no feelings, why would I care if you live or die?" The words were too harsh. Tina couldn't accept them. She shook her head, her face pale. Stop it. Don't say any more. Jason continued, if you really die today, the most I'll feel for you is a bit of guilt for not being able to stop it. But Tina, I won't be like you, unable to forget Ethan for 8 years. In a few years, even that guilt will fade. I will forget you, and I will have a new life. And you will probably only regret your own foolishness today. Tina couldn't believe Jason could be so heartless. He wasn't like this before. But she had forgotten that Jason, who had lost both parents and become the head of his family and the leader of Kent Enterprises, was no pushover. He had only been tolerant and accommodating because he loved her. Once that love was gone, his heart could be harder than anyone's. Why can't you give me one chance? She was desperate and unwilling to accept it. I don't understand. In the past, no matter what I did to you, you would always forgive me. Why not this time? She almost screamed the last few words. This time, Jason was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, there was a strange sadness in his calm eyes. Because until now, I've realized that for the past 8 years, I may have been loving the wrong person. He had loved the Tina of 8 years ago, not the wife who had become unrecognizable because of Ethan. His words were a direct negation of their past 8 years, a fatal blow. Tina covered her ears and let out a heart-wrenching scream. Her hands left the railing. Everyone's heart leaped into their throats. Jason's palms were sweaty, but his tone became even colder. Tina, it's time to grow up. Stop causing trouble for others. He paused and said, I hope the courthouse is the last time we ever see each other. With that, Jason turned and left without a second glance. Tina watched his retreating back through a blur of tears. After a long moment, she collapsed onto the rooftop and began to sob uncontrollably. She had finally given up hope. She finally understood that she and Jason were impossible. That man really didn't love her anymore. Parting on good terms was the last bit of dignity he had offered her, but she had been too arrogant to see it. After leaving the rooftop, Jason didn't go far. He stood in the stairwell, listening as the crowd pulled Tina back to safety. Only then did he let out a pent-up breath. A breeze blew in from a half-open window, and he shivered, realizing his entire back was soaked in sweat. At least the outcome was good. Otherwise, if Tina had jumped today, he would have been branded as the man who drove his wife to her death. With a bitter smile, Jason walked down the stairs, but someone blocked his path. You're really not going back to Tina? Shawn met Jason's sweeping gaze and said gravely, You weren't lying up on the roof? Jason ignored him. Shawn had never been on his radar. So all Shawn heard were 2 cold words, move. A surge of anger at being looked down upon rose in him. As Shawn's face darkened and he was about to speak, a hand clapped him on the shoulder. Jason's bodyguard had appeared from nowhere, hooked an arm around his neck, and forcibly pulled him aside. Sir, you go first. Jason nodded and descended the stairs, ignoring Shawn. The bodyguard remained, patting Shawn's angry but speechless face. What? Didn't learn your lesson last time. Remembering the kick he'd received, Shawn's face twisted. His back still ached. What do you want? He stammered. I'm telling you, the police are right upstairs. Don't you try anything. The bodyguard looked at him as if he were an idiot. What are you talking about? Hitting you would get my hands dirty. Once Jason was gone, he let go, wiping his hand as if it were contaminated, and looked at Shawn with undisguised contempt. Pathetic. A coward like you. Even if our boss and Miss Smith get divorced, she'll never look your way. Shawn trembled with rage. He was a young master of the Carter family. Yet a mere bodyguard dared to insult him like this. But he knew it was true. He wasn't good enough for Tina. In terms of family status, the Smith and Carter families were once on the same level, but the Carters had been declining, and his branch of the family had become the least important since his brother's death. In terms of ability, he couldn't run a business and had no real skills. He could only paint, and he wasn't even good at that, still relatively unknown. But so what? If he wasn't good enough, he would just have to find a way to drag the great Miss Smith down from her pedestal. Once she was wallowing in the mud, Shawn thought, would she still look down on him? The stairwell was quiet. Only the wind saw the flash of vicious intent in Shawn's eyes. Not long after Jason returned, he received a message from Tina. I agree to the divorce. The next morning, at 8 a.m., the marriage certificate in his hand was replaced with a divorce decree. Jason stared at the document for a moment, stunned. But the stun quickly turned to relief. He didn't look back at Tina, who had been silent and hollow-eyed throughout the entire process. Instead, he strode outside. The sun was rising, heralding a new beginning. Jason smiled. He had already booked a flight for a trip, departing in 2 hours. In the morning light, his steps grew lighter, as if he had finally shaken off the oppressive weight of the past 8 years and could finally cast the name Tina into the river of memory. Perhaps the name would still bring a pang of pain if it ever surfaced, but that didn't matter anymore. Jason knew he had once truly loved Tina, and he truly hoped they would never see each other again. Just as the plane took off, a post exposing Tina's secrets quietly appeared on the trending topics, quickly causing a massive uproar. But by then, Jason's phone was off and he couldn't see it. Jason chose a small town in a foreign country, known as an artist's paradise, as his destination. It was already 9 p.m. when his flight landed. After a night's rest, he took his camera the next day, ready to explore. But the untimely ringing of his phone seemed to be a bad omen. Jason hesitated when he saw the caller ID but answered anyway. Auntie. Jason, Mrs. Smith's voice was choked with sobs. Tina tried to kill herself by slitting her wrists. They just managed to save her. But her mental state is very fragile. Can you please come see her? Jason's brow furrowed. What happened? It's the people online. They're attacking Tina. Jason asked her to wait, then opened up X. Tina's name was in the top 10 trending topics. Someone had posted videos of Tina publicly embarrassing Jason for her white moonlight, even though she was married to him. Her faking cancer to deceive him and using netizens to pressure him into coming back had also been exposed. Tina had been a hot topic recently, and after the suicide threat, many people sympathized with her. Now that the story had flipped, a torrent of abuse flooded her social media accounts. Well, I've seen it all today. Everyone, come look at this. Miss Smith yelling at her husband in public for her first love. All because he broke a brooch her first love gave her? Wait, you're at a banquet with your husband, and you're wearing a brooch your first love gave you? Do you even see your partner as a person? That's not all. I saw it with my own eyes. At that art gallery fire, this lady didn't care if her husband lived or died. All for a painting, and almost got Mr. Kent killed. The most disgusting part is, when Mr. Kent finally grew a spine, she faked cancer to trap him and bought trending topics to exploit our sympathy. Ah, you deserve to be divorced. And when that didn't work, you threatened suicide. Why don't you just go through with it? The internet was full of all kinds of people, and the insults grew more and more vicious. It wasn't just online. People were sending Tina harassing texts and calls, even leaving funeral wreaths and photos at her door. People would point and throw trash at her on the street. Under the immense pressure, Tina's mental state completely collapsed, and she really did try to take her own life. Jason felt a complicated mix of emotions after reading everything. But after a moment of silence, he still refused Mrs. Smith. Auntie, if Tina's not well, you should be finding her a psychologist. Not me. But, we're divorced, Auntie. After saying that, Jason hung up before Mrs. Smith could say anything else. But his mood was ruined, and he lost all desire to go out. In the hospital, Tina, wearing an oxygen mask, heard Jason's cold voice coming from her mother's phone. The line on her heart monitor went flat. Jason didn't know about any of this. From that phone call, his trip was doomed to be anything but peaceful. The next day, a problem with a project at his company forced him to pack his bags and return home. Later, he heard that Tina had been discharged from the hospital and that Shawn was by her side. The person who told him this was a mutual friend of his and Tina's. The friend watched Jason's face and said, I heard when Tina tried to kill herself, it was Shawn who found her and took her to the hospital. If he had been just a few minutes later, she might not have made it. Tina's parents are very grateful to him. I think he might just become the Smith family's next son-in-law. Jason just grunted in response. Seeing that he really didn't care about Tina anymore, the friend dropped the subject. A month later, Mr. Smith approached Jason and made a direct demand. Jason, you and Tina need to get back together. In the tea house, Jason's hand paused as he was pouring tea. He looked up at Mr. Smith. Uncle, when you asked me out, you said you wanted to talk about the partnership between our families. If this is a personal matter, I'm afraid I don't have time. Mr. Smith sighed. Jason, Tina is not doing well. Only you can help her get back on her feet. Jason was getting impatient. First Tina, then her mother, and now her father was trying to get them back together. He wanted to leave, but Mr. Smith was an elder he respected and someone who had helped him in the past. So Jason forced himself to be patient. Uncle, whether she can get back on her feet is up to her. No one else can help. No, Mr. Smith shook his head. As long as you go back to her, she'll regain her confidence. Jason's tone finally cooled. I don't know how many times I have to say it for you to believe that Tina and I are not getting back together. If you have nothing else to discuss, I have a lot of work to do at the office, so I'll be going. Mr. Smith knew that if he let Jason leave now, it would be difficult to meet with him again. He gritted his teeth and said, just as Jason was getting up, what if the Smith family pulls out of the R8 project? Jason stopped in his tracks. He realized Mr. Smith wasn't here to persuade him, but to threaten him. Jason's expression immediately darkened, his eyes cold and deep. When he spoke again, even his form of address changed. Then you're welcome to try, Mr. Smith. The R8 project was the most important project for both Kent Enterprises and Smith Industries this year, with a huge investment of money, manpower, and resources. If Smith Industries, which held half the core technology, pulled out, Kent Enterprises would suffer immense losses. Similarly, Smith Industries would also be hit hard. Jason never thought Mr. Smith would stoop to using his company for personal gain for his daughter's sake. Tina had become the person she was largely due to her parents' indulgence. He didn't want to say another word to Mr. Smith and left with a cold face. Left behind, Mr. Smith let out a helpless sigh and made a call. Pull our technical teams from the R8 project and stop the funding. The Smith family is temporarily withdrawing from this project. Of course, he knew how much Smith Industries stood to lose, but to save his daughter, he would do anything, even sacrifice his own life. But in that instant, Mr. Smith seemed to have aged significantly. He went home and walked toward his daughter's bedroom. In the room, Tina lay on the bed like a soulless doll. The reason she had become like this had started 3 days ago. Because of Ethan, Mr. and Mrs. Smith had never really welcomed Shawn's visits. But ever since Shawn saved Tina, their attitude had changed completely. They treated him like an honored guest. Shawn was triumphant. When Tina had tried to kill herself, he had deliberately waited until she was on the brink of death before calling an ambulance, thus winning over her parents. Now only Tina was left. Shawn had thought that by being by her side during her lowest point, he would gain her trust and affection. See? Everyone despises you, curses you, abandons you. Only I am here for you. In his fantasy, the great Miss Smith would cling to him in gratitude, seeing him as her savior, and be devoted to him forever. But the opposite happened. Tina was still cold to him. Her heart was completely occupied by Jason. There was no room for even Ethan anymore. After Shawn eagerly confessed his love to Tina, she shut him out and refused to see him again. Shawn never expected that even at this point, he still couldn't win Tina's affection. In a fit of pique, he blurted out a secret he had kept for years. Humph, Tina, who do you think you are? Some prize that everyone wants to worship? If it weren't for your family's money, only a psycho like Jason would like a lunatic like you. Too bad you drove him away for my brother. But Tina, Shawn sneered, do you really think my brother liked you? He was just like me, after the Smith family's money. Not you, you naive fool. His words were like a red-hot needle piercing Tina's heart. Tina grabbed Shawn's arm. What did you say? Shawn realized he had misspoken. In a panic, he tried to run, but Tina wouldn't let him go. As they struggled outside, Tina was hit by an oncoming car. Later, Shawn was taken away by the police. Tina survived after emergency surgery, but her leg was permanently injured. When Tina woke up, She was like an empty shell, her spirit gone. She never spoke another word. She couldn't face the cruel truth. She had loved the wrong person for so many years. The thought of how she had hurt Jason for 8 years for a fraud like Ethan was excruciating. Her heart was bleeding. Ever since they found out Jason and Tina were never getting back together, their friends stopped mentioning her in front of him. So Jason didn't know what had happened to Tina. With Smith Industries pulling out, the R8 project kept him incredibly busy. He wouldn't give in to Mr. Smith's demands. The best solution was to find a new partner. But the difficulty was that very few teams had the required technology, and the only 2 abroad were unwilling to share with Kent Enterprises. Just as Jason was planning to fly abroad himself, he was surprised by a visit from Vivian Sterling, the CEO of Viridian Pharmaceuticals. "I hear you're looking for a new partner, Mr. Kent. Our team has recently made breakthroughs in several core technologies for the R8 project. I was wondering if we might have the opportunity to collaborate with Kent Enterprises?" Vivian then presented a pre-prepared contract. Jason looked at the contract. The profit sharing was fair, with no hint of taking advantage of his situation. Jason wasn't one to be coy. He raised an eyebrow and extended his hand to Vivian. "Thank you for this timely help, Miss Sterling." "It's nothing, just mutually beneficial," Vivian said calmly. "Even without Viridian, I'm sure you would have resolved this perfectly, Mr. Kent." News of the partnership between Kent Enterprises and Viridian spread quickly. Smith Industries, having unilaterally broken the contract, now faced not only huge compensation claims but also a massive financial loss. Mr. Smith never expected Jason to actually find a new partner. He collapsed onto the sofa in defeat. For using his position for personal gain, he was removed as chairman by a unanimous vote of the shareholders and board of directors and resigned in disgrace. When Tina heard this news, her vacant eyes moved for the first time in days. She finally stopped running from reality. It seemed she had finally grown up. In the end, she went abroad with her parents to recuperate. Before leaving, Tina visited Shawn in prison and confirmed from his own mouth that Ethan, who had once seemed to love her to death, had never had any feelings for her. At that time, the Carter family was already in decline, while the Smith family was thriving. Ethan had set his sights on Tina, his childhood friend. If Ethan hadn't died, the Smith family might have already been his. "How could I possibly love Tina? I've been playing with her since we were in diapers. I got sick of her a long time ago." Ethan's mocking laughter echoed through time, a whip that snapped Tina back to reality. Tina burned everything Ethan had left behind, taking only the photo album of her and Jason. 2 hours before her flight, Tina impulsively ran to Jason's apartment building, but in the end, she didn't go up. In her current state, she had no right to face him. Tina left quietly. It was only much later that Jason heard the news. But it didn't matter. He wouldn't waste another ounce of energy on people who were no longer part of his life. At the end of the year, after the busiest period for the company, Jason finally had a chance to go on vacation again. He went to the same art town he hadn't had time to explore before. The day he arrived, Jason began to wander around the town, with no particular destination in mind, just walking and taking pictures. The town's scenery was beautiful. Every shot could be a wallpaper. Jason's heart had never felt so peaceful. He photographed the dome of a Gothic building, the pigeons in the sky, the ancient cobblestone streets, and the people walking toward him on those streets. "Huh?" Jason paused, looking up from his camera at Vivian Sterling, a woman he had only met 3 times. Vivian walked up to him, smiling. "I didn't know you were into photography, Mr. Kent." Her tone was so familiar, as if they had known each other for years. The strange feeling Jason had suppressed before resurfaced. He looked at Vivian and asked nonchalantly, "Miss Sterling, what a coincidence. Are you here on vacation too?" "I am," Vivian said, smiling at him. "But I'm not here for the vacation. I'm here for a person." Jason's eyelid twitched. If he thought he was imagining things before, Vivian's almost explicit hint made everything clear. Vivian Sterling was interested in him. Jason was surprised, but he didn't follow up on her words. Instead, he pointed to her suitcase. "Where are you staying, Miss Sterling? I can walk you there." Thank you, Mr. Kent. Vivian gave the name of her hotel. It was the same one as his. Jason's expression paused again. Then he walked alongside Vivian on the cobblestone path. Neither of them spoke for a while. If they were just business partners, Jason could have chatted about their projects. But now, the walk felt strangely long and arduous. He had no intention of jumping into a new relationship. But Vivian's words were ambiguous. As adults, they both understood what she meant, but since it wasn't explicitly stated, Jason couldn't just reject her outright. Compared to him, Vivian wasn't as relaxed as she appeared. Upon learning that Jason was here, she had impulsively flown over after him. Would her actions annoy him? Vivian felt she needed to explain that she wasn't some stalker who tracked his private schedule. Okay, she had used some means to find out where he was going. So Vivian opened her mouth, but couldn't explain anything. She was afraid she would only make things worse. The atmosphere started to become awkward. Vivian was getting a headache. She shouldn't have been so impulsive with her words earlier. She also suddenly felt that this cobblestone path was incredibly long. Weren't they there yet? Finally, the vibration of a phone broke the heavy silence. Vivian quickly answered. It was just the hotel staff confirming her information, but the usually decisive CEO managed to drag out the conversation for 5 minutes. She only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the hotel entrance. Thank you, I've arrived. No need to come get me. When they reached the hotel, Jason said before leaving, if you need any help, just let me know. Vivian thanked him and nodded. After they parted ways, Vivian went to her room, and Jason went back to taking pictures. In the evening, as Jason stepped into the hotel lobby at sunset, Vivian was chatting with a few foreign women, a glass of white wine in her hand. Seeing him, Vivian walked over, glass in hand. Jason hesitated for a moment, for some reason not moving, until Vivian was right in front of him. Jason smelled the sweet aroma of the white wine. He looked up into Vivian's smiling eyes. After a drink, Vivian was different, more relaxed than when they first met. She leaned in slightly, looked into Jason's eyes, and whispered, Jason. Jason thought she was drunk. I'm not drunk, Vivian said, as if she could read his mind. I'd never get drunk outside. But some things are easier to say with a little liquid courage. Jason already guessed what she was going to say. Before he could stop her, Vivian spoke. I don't know if you were happy about your divorce, but I was very happy, because Vivian just smiled, not finishing the sentence. Years ago, when Jason's parents died and he was being bullied, it was Tina who had reached out to him. From then on, she had occupied his heart, and he couldn't see anyone else. But Jason didn't know that every time a teacher came to intervene, it was because a girl named Vivian Sterling had reported it. But the Vivian of that time was shy and could only watch him from a distance. And because of her shyness, she had missed her chance with the boy she liked for many years. Fortunately, fate had been kind to her, giving her another chance at happiness. Miss Sterling, Jason said, trying to clarify things while Vivian was distracted. Vivian placed a finger on his lips. I know what you're going to say. She smiled, her eyes full of warmth. Don't feel pressured. I'm just making my presence known. If you ever want to start dating again, would you consider me first? Of course, I won't be as foolish as you and waste 8 years. I'll wait for you for 3 years. If you're still guarding your heart after 3 years, I'll stop waiting. 4 years later, Jason and Vivian held their wedding. On that day, Tina stood in an inconspicuous corner, quietly watching them exchange rings, then slipped away without a sound. Jason glanced in her direction from a distance, but quickly brought his gaze back. His gentle eyes focused on Vivian, and Tina never set foot on a plane back to her home country again.